But that 27 years, that's a long time to experience life. That's a long time to fall down and get up. And fall down and get up. That's time to experience and have memories with your children. Children that don't have a memory of Melissa. Not Joseph, not Christina. That's an opportunity to have and create memories with your grandchildren. I have 3 grandchildren that you heard Christina testify. She's got 3 boys. There's opportunities. That's what was missing. That's what has been missed. That is what has been taken away from Melissa. The opportunity to have a life, to have those experiences. And she deserved that, even if she didn't want to spend it with this defendant. Even if she wanted to leave him, she still deserved to have that opportunity. She was manipulated. She was intimidated. She was abused. And she was coerced to give up her children. I believe that's what the evidence shows. And I can tell you, 27 years later, I would not expect a judge to allow a defendant that battered his wife to be alone with them, to speak to them 6 days after it happened. Roughly 5 or 6 days after they went down to apply for a protective order. 5 to 6 days after the order, that had no contract was in place, the judge lets her speak along with him. And then on that very same day, I want to dismiss. On that very same day, children go back with mom. And we don't know what was said. We don't know what was said then. We don't know what he said to them. We don't even know if the bruises that were on her from his attack on July 21st, 1990, we don't even know if those had fully healed yet. I can assure you the mental and emotional trauma from that happened. Having to call the police after a period of time in July where we know she had already been abused and experienced abuse. So when we think about domestic violence and we think about being intimidated and coerced, that's what I want you to think about when we look back at that date, July 29th. I believe the evidence shows that she was intimidated. She was able to be coerced, especially after being beaten for a year by this defendant. And I don't believe that she ever intended to give up her children and walk away from her family and her children.
Your Honor, I want to object to counsel's repeated use of "I believe," "I can assure you." Counsel is not supposed to interject personal opinion.
Understood. Mr. Faucette has offered to rephrase. Go ahead.
Now, the indictment you'll get will have one count of murder, for the malice murder, the intent to kill, the intention to kill.
Kill was walk down Walker Park. And this is why we're here. From what was found on April 29th, 1999, and June 3rd, 1999. Goal of Mr. Wolfenbarger, in his job, activities within that same vicinity, in the wooded area. In a minute from the residence where Christopher Wolfenbarger and Melissa Wolfenbarger lived. And your judge is going to instruct you that you are duty bound to follow the law. And in your consideration of the law, you should consider certain things and certain things you should not consider, such as sympathy for either the victim in this case or the defendant, disagreement with the law, conjecture, dislike of the system, television, public opinion, penalty or punishment. The only thing that you are to decide when you're considering the evidence is whether or not the state has met its burden beyond a reasonable doubt and prove a guilt for innocence of the guilt of this defendant. You should consider the elements of the crime, the law which the judge will give you. Your oath that you've taken as jurors backs the case as presented in the form of testimony, video exhibits such as the video of the defendant hiding, audio exhibits such as the audio of the defendant stating that he never looked for her, acknowledging that he took assault, also acknowledging that she was dating someone and seeing someone and staying with someone they might.
She
Also consider the credibility of the witnesses.
What
was it
like when they were testifying? How did they answer the questions? You are entitled, and you're the determinant of the credibility of not just the state's witnesses, but also the witnesses that the defendant called. You all consider what the defense is. Now, the defendant doesn't have to present any defense. Walk into court Tuesday, Wednesday, say, hey, make them prove it. But that's not what happened in this case. The defense in this case is Carl Patton. Listen to the theory and opening statement. Defense in this case is Carl Patton killed Melissa Wolfenbarger. Other than the fact that evidence came in that Carl Patton committed murders, what other piece of evidence or fact, anything that you heard during the course of this week, what points to that? What other fact would allow you to create that evidence? Other than the fact that he killed someone, the evidence came in, Melissa didn't even know about it. The only thing that's come in about the relationship between the Pattons and their children is that they appear to love each other. It's not so unbelievable. Based off of the letters that Melissa wrote, cards that she wrote, times that she wanted to take her father, Carl, and her mother, Norma, out to lunch. Those are going to be back in the room with you for you to observe and look at while you deliberate. This case is just simply not about Carl Patton as much as they want it to be. This case is about domestic violence. This case is about intimidation. This case is about loss of control. The loss of control that this defendant had over the custody of his children and over Melissa. No matter how much they want this case to be about Carl Patton, this case has nothing to do with Carl Patton, other than the fact that he asked law enforcement to find his daughter. Why does Norma go to the residence of Kathy Wolfenbarger looking for Melissa, raising attention to that issue, getting their responsible for it? Now, a lot of facts have come to evidence in this case. I would ask you to put back weight on more the facts that have been corroborated, like that. You heard that from Norma, and you don't have to just take Norma's word for it because you heard that from Christina. She does not have a lot of memories from her childhood. She doesn't have a memory of her mother, but she remembers that day. Because that stood out in her. Where's my daughter? I could just imagine how that was. It wasn't a calm statement. It was screaming, where's my daughter? Norma probably showed up to that residence of Kathy in a panic. Where's my daughter? That's something that Christina would remember. And that's why you should believe that happened. And that's why that theory is just plain ridiculous. He killed Melissa Wolfenbarger. Most importantly, your common sense is the main thing that we're asking you to use in the side of this case. What does the evidence tell you? What are the facts tell you? What has been presented? Judge is
also going to charge you on what reasonable doubt is and what it is. Judge is going to charge you that the state did not require to prove the doubt or the guilt of the defendant beyond all doubt for mathematical certainty. Reasonable doubt is a doubt of a fair-minded and impartial juror honestly seeking the truth. Is a doubt based on common sense and reason. It does not mean a vague or arbitrary doubt, like Carl Patton. A arbitrary, not supported by the facts, thrown out, hoping to stick on the wall.
Evidence may be direct or circumstantial, or both. Consider the evidence, you may use your reasoning and common sense to make deductions and reach conclusions. may be direct or circumstantial. Direct evidence is that which may be seen or heard. Otherwise, direct consents. So when Christina says, I saw Norma show up to the residence in a panic looking for her daughter, that's direct evidence of her observations. And from that recollection, the testimony of Norma, you could infer that Norma was sincere when she was looking for her daughter. The types of inferences that you can infer from the facts that have been presented. And then we have the circumstantial evidence. This is exactly what I was referring to. We got direct evidence of tool marks on bones that were recovered and identified as the remains of Melissa Wolfenbarger. Tool marks are direct evidence. Those are observations. You'll have those that you will be able to review and look at while you deliberate. We also have direct evidence that the defendant was in possession of assault. Two separate facts. Now you wouldn't, and we wouldn't walk into court on Wednesday and ask you to convict because there are tool marks on the bones and remains of Melissa Wolfenbarger. And we wouldn't ask you to walk in here on Wednesday when we start presenting evidence and convict this defendant of murder because he was in possession of assault. Can you draw logical, common sense conclusions from that? That's just one piece of the evidence that has been presented, which you were able to do that. We had assault around the same time that the wife was missing, or the wife's remains were located. The medical examiner says there's assault that we presented as Exhibit 66 is consistent with the type of marks that could be made by that instrument. And in his own statement that he was in possession of it around that time, and in the statement of the rocks, although they were elected to say so, that they never got that salt back. We would not ask you to convict solely based on that fact alone, but that is a fact that you can consider, and those are inferences that you can draw. Reasonable, common sense inferences. So this is what I saw when I woke up this morning. I probably see this a lot more than most people, but when I woke up, this is what I saw. And I had time, so I stopped by to get some gas. And by the time I finished, I got back and I crunk up my car, and I'm back on full. So I never saw anything going to my vehicle, but during that period, I smelled what appeared to be gas because I'm cutting grass. I smell gas. There's less money in my account. The numbers on the dial are different. I hear a clicking sound. And so, even though I never saw any gas on my vehicle, there are logical deductions and conclusions that I would draw from all those facts and circumstances. Nobody's going to be able to come in and tell me that Santa Claus put gas in the vehicle. So when we ask you to use your common sense and look at the facts, the evidence is what it says it is. The facts are what they are. In the count of murder, you'll get the indictment. You'll see that it's charged that the defendant with malice aforethought caused the death of Melissa Wolfenbarger by inflicting homicidal violence. Now, as it's charged, that term homicidal violence, based on the manner in which the remains were recovered, it is impossible for the medical examiners to determine if she was shot, if she was strangled, if she was stabbed, any number of ways that you can commit a murder could have been committed to Melissa Wolfenbarger. But you can't tell if someone has been strangled if their neck is missing. You can't tell if they're stabbed or shot in their torso if there's no torso. And what we're able to determine based on the testimony of the medical examiner is that the facts and circumstances which she observed is how the remains were located, the history and evidence of domestic violence in that relationship, the fact there's evidence that someone removed her limbs with salt. All of those facts, and the fact you heard her testify that in her medical opinion, her expert opinion, she did not believe that Melissa Wolfenbarger died of natural causes. All those are facts that point to homicidal violence. And her opinion was that it was more likely that Melissa Wolfenbarger died from homicide. That was her opinion. And that's why the indictment is charged like that, is because of how she was found. But that does not take away from what we have proven based on the testimony. And that is that she died from being murdered. That is called homicide. Judge is going to charge you with the law of malice. It is not ill will or hatred. It is just simply a killing without justification, excuse, or mitigation. It can be expressed with deliberate intention to unlawfully take the life of another person, and it may be implied with no considerable provocation appears in all the circumstances of killing show an abandoned and malignant heart. I submit to you the facts and the circumstances of this case, and all the facts and circumstances of this case point to that conclusion as the only reasonable conclusion, that this defendant did in fact commit malice murder on the person of Melissa Wolfenbarger. The state does not have to prove premeditation to prove murder, regardless of how briefly that malicious intent existed. Malice may be formed in an instant. And if malice was in the defendant's mind at the time of the killing or act, and moved the defendant to do it, that is enough for the killing to be murder. The state does not have to prove motive to prove murder. Any evidence of motive admitted for use to determine the defendant's state of mind at the time of killing, you are allowed to consider it, such as the evidence of domestic violence is lawful evidence of motive. Did he abuse her that year? Did he hit her? Did that happen multiple times that year? That's what the facts have shown. You can use that and those facts and the expert testimony from the domestic violence expert as evidence of the defendant's motive. And all of those things I previously mentioned, the fact that there's an open criminal case that she wasn't able to appear to. The fact that she was seeing someone else. The fact that she planned on leaving, that she had continually left it throughout that year. All of that is evidence of motive. The judge is also going to tell you that the testimony of the single witness, if believed, is sufficient to establish a fact. There's no legal requirement of corroboration of the witness, provided you find the evidence to be sufficient. That means if, when you heard the testimony of Christina, and you believed it, you don't need any corroboration for that to be a fact that you consider. That means if you heard the testimony of Christina, and you believed her when she said that this defendant would always talk about going on a run, when you talk about, you know how to get rid of a body, who says that to his daughter, considering how her mother was found? Now that's after he says that after Melissa Wolfenbarger's remains have been identified. He makes those statements. That's what she remembers growing up. Does that? This defendant. This case went through several detectives that basically continued to work on this case. Detective Calhoun and Detective Shepard. Even through the retirement of Detective Calhoun, he continued to work with Detective Shepard until the cold case unit was created. And then 3 years later, you have this indictment. So from Detective Kelly, when we're talking about this skull is found, to the point where Norma Patton goes to Henry County, and Detective Stott really is the first investigator that starts to really investigate and look for Melissa as a missing person in Henry County.
he wasn't able to get a lot of traction with the Atlanta Police Department at that point in '99. We have Detective Stott, who interviewed the defendant. Back during that period, it's before 2003, he says, March, April '99, last time he saw her alive. You have Detective Calhoun being assigned the case in 2003 when her remains are identified. And then when he retires, you have Detective Shepard, and he works with Stein to do some additional testing. And Detective Stott testified that he was one of the first persons to begin the missing persons investigation. And that's when the defendant, when he interviewed, told him that the last time he saw Melissa was in March of '99. And we know that from the subsequent statement in 2021, when he met with Detective Shepard, that's not exactly what he said. He says, it was around December of 1998. The only difference between when he makes that statement before 2003, that he saw her in '99 in March, and in 2021 is Melissa's remains have been identified. We know that the remains were located right by his job. And I submit to you that there's a reason why those two statements are inconsistent. That's his mind. Detective Calhoun spoke with the defendant. Once the remains were identified, suspected the defendant once the remains were identified, and also began to look into the history. Because the first thing they do in homicide investigations, they look at what was the victim's life like. First thing he saw was, well, there's evidence of domestic violence. And what also stood out is the location of where Melissa's remains were found. We know that from the testimony, Melissa and Chris, the defendant, lived in this area by Brookline Street. We know that Action Glass is right here. And here's the junkyard. So we know that the head was across the street from Action Glass. And we know that the extremities are virtually right next door to Action Glass in this wooded area. So, make no mistake, everyone's a suspect, but at this point, all of the evidence is pointing in this direction, at this defendant. What is the evidence against this defendant? So, there's a timeline of abuse in this case that was presented. We go back to the beginning of '98. You know, the testimony of China Pat was that Melissa started working with her. I believe it was a Virginia Highland Waffle House somewhere around the end of '97. So they were working together, sometimes on the same shift, at the beginning of '98. There was one point when China remembered seeing marks around the neck of Melissa Wolfenbarger. What she described appeared to show that marks of someone's hand around Melissa's neck. Immediately, you know, it was this defendant went out to confront him. And that's when he got into the altercation with Troy Clinton. That's what you heard from the testimony of Team Fan. That's the beginning of 1998. And we get to July of '98. And so this is what Detective Calhoun is looking at as he's beginning to investigate the case. He's looking at the location of the remains and where they lived at, his job, and he's looking at all this information. All the evidence is pointing at this defendant. There's a police report that's created where the officer observes bruising and marks on the person, Ms. Wolfenbarger, Melissa. After that, he directs her. The defendant isn't there. He doesn't wait around. After that, he directs her to go report him, take out a protective order, get you some protection from him.
And that's exactly what she did. She went down there in person and applied for a protective order. So those are the records that Detective Kaplan had access to. This is a day after that July incident, July 21st. So the next day, July 22nd, she goes to the courthouse and petitioner seeking relief from family violence. From him. That's who she was seeking relief from. She was seeking relief from the choking that she had and her sister observed, that Troy fought him about. And then we had that Rule 9 side setting it down from the 29th, and then we have that where the judge allows her to speak with this defendant. Just days after that. Days after her hair is being dragged and pulled. Days after she's being hit. And then that happens. And it wasn't just what Tina said. It wasn't just what Marlon Sutton said about what he observed. There's another person who saw that abuse. Dorothy. Jones, Cooley Jones. Dorothy Cooley. She lived in that area. She had known the defendant before she met Melissa. And remember seeing a day where Melissa had shades on and a black eye. When we talk about testimony of the domestic violence expert about humiliation, isn't that humiliating? Walking around with yet another bruise, another mark, another scratch. Sitting up here talking about skin conditions. That's not a skin condition, that's a black eye. You should be offended by them talking about skin conditions and kind of pawn that off as reasons why people saw marks on her. Tina didn't see a skin condition. These marks from this defendant's hand around her neck, that wasn't a skin condition. That was bruising from being choked. The black eye was a skin condition. He punched her in the eye. It's not a skin condition. Thomas Dixon. All the witness statements line up perfectly on top of each other. The witnesses that observed the abuse during the shoot. This is at the interview. So we go from Tina at the beginning of 1998. We go from Dorothy. We go to July, Officer 7. Then we get to the end of 98, and she's still being abused because she's still going back and forth between Dixon and this defendant. She's still talking about the abuse. This is at the end of the year. Last time he sees her is in December. She's being whooped, intimidated, coerced, bruised, punched, dragged down the street the entire year of 98. And I submit to you, that's not the first year it started. It didn't just start in 98. You can infer that this has been going on for a while. Not just 98. Dixon confronted the defendant after he came to the Waffle House at the end of that year. You gotta leave. You gotta go. What did Dixon see? Them talking, Melissa crying. Kind of like that July 29th day at the courthouse. Them talking, Melissa crying. Then we got investigator over here. You heard testimony that from the mother. The DA's office went to interview the defendant's sister a year before that happened. He knew from from that the DA's office was still conducting an active investigation into the death, murder, disappearance of his missing, murdered wife. So make no mistake about it. When they show up, that had already happened the year before. He knows exactly why the police are at the front of his house. Oh shit. It's his fan. He's hiding for 30, 40 minutes. Come out. He's right here. Let's see the video. There he is. Come on out, buddy. Gig is up.
He had 27 years. It's up. Hide it. And doesn't it look like what you saw? Doesn't it look like it was planned? It didn't look like it was his, oh,
No. It looks like he planned to go there. Got there real quick, went out there, and sat out there for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes. It's the police. Go hide. Guilty. Detective Shepard. You picked up this investigation. Had those same suspicions. Calhoun had. All the evidence is pointing to this defendant. But I'm going to interview Chris. See what he has to say. Let's see if this state is inconsistent. Well, he admits to being fired because the Rocks thought he stole the salt. Well, that's interesting. Admitted that he borrowed it. That's interesting. He admitted that him and Melissa were having problems. Admitted that Melissa was seeing and staying with a guy named Mike. Admitted that he did not look for his wife. Well, here's the thing. Even if he still has 2 young children, very young children. Even if him and Melissa had planned on going their separate ways, wouldn't you think that at some point he'd want to be able to tell his children that he worked for their mother? Wouldn't you think that? Wouldn't you think at some point, for his children's sake, he would have tried to look for their mother? That is a fact I think you should consider, because you look at all those pictures of Six Flags. What is he trying to say? He's a good father? No, he's not. He look at him up. And you can take your kids to Six Flags every day. That does not take away from the fact that you didn't do what you were supposed to do. One, you should have abused her. You should have intimidated her. You shouldn't have punched her. You shouldn't have grabbed her head and dragged her. You shouldn't have murdered her. That's not a good father. And then you have that statement that he made, the detective, Detective Shepard, and I want you to hear this. So I'm going to take a moment and play it. I want you to hear this, what he says, those points in particular, what he says about the assault, what he says about his efforts to look for his wife, and what he says about his knowledge that she was going to leave him, the problems that they were having, and the knowledge that she had in this case.
Battery 60% last time you saw Melissa?
And that's the thing, you know, I don't quite remember if the last time was, because I remember, like, she would come and go, okay? And we'll say that it wasn't like, we're happy-go-lucky, she's sitting right here one day, and then she was up and gone. And I don't know if that's the way.
So would you describe your relationship as tumultuous or like on again, off again? You know,
It was rocky there towards the end, mainly, I think, because it was her family so far trying to get back in her head and trying to make her think things and do things. And
like what?
man, she never had a relationship with her sister at all. You know, and then there towards the end, you know, I guess everybody has a need for one, you know, a family and wants their love and wants that type of thing. You know, and I think there towards the end, maybe she tried a little to try to get back with him or to do or what. But I don't think it was near what they made it seem like, that she was there all the time, or she leaving cards or pictures. And I know that did happen sometimes when she did, you know, at that time, but the struggle that we had, we had a common goal of what we were trying to accomplish. You know, we had several dogs in our road.
Which was to go to California.
This is a good
Where
way.
were the kids at and all that?
She was like, I wanted my mom. She didn't want Norman in the house. She didn't want her kids to be raised like she was. They never there. There was no, you know, we knew that her names were bad and that anybody was feeling right there in the.
Okay, so when was the last time you saw her?
But the last actual time I remember was like, I woke up and she was gone. Like she woke, we were in the middle of the night and she left. And I don't know if that was the last time or the last time when I dropped her off the train station to go to work. If it was the exact. I don't
Do you remember telling Detective Calhoun that the last time you saw her, you were driving up to your house on Brookline and saw her walking down the street? And that was the last time that you saw her.
I don't know what they're saying now, but it's possible.
Okay.
I just
So
don't.
that, basically you said that was the last time you saw her, that she said she was going to the train station. Something to that effect. I'm not saying it was verbatim, that's what you said, but it was something along those
It's
lines.
possible. I'll give you that.
But does that sound like it's accurate?
Again, it could be. I don't know.
But you remember that incident, or can you recall that happening almost about to be home, driving up and her walking down the road? Does that ring any bells?
I mean, that's usually the way it happened because we only had one car.
Okay.
You know, if there
She
was,
would walk to the train station to try to go to work or something?
you know, or I give her a ride, or she, you know, sometimes she just wanted to walk. You know? We're not talking about like train station far away, we're talking about from here right to the end of the road.
Right. Yeah, I know, he's within the city, so I understand. But talking about that specifically, do you remember that day specifically?
I don't know. One.
Did you remember?
One of the road.
Well, I would like to ask you, what was she wearing? Do you remember? Did she have a purse with her? You know? So you don't, when the last time you saw her, when you came back home, and she wasn't there, where was her stuff? She didn't have a car, she couldn't move it, so it was still there in the house?
I don't understand. I mean, if she left it just like that, it was only like just a small. I mean, kind of the same thing I did. I mean, when Austin Drive was moved, my grandparents was going to sell the house and everything. You know, when I left, I didn't take part of nothing. I went to live in my office or whatever little.
After the last time you saw her, or that when she left, did she tell her family? Did she tell your family? Did you tell her that your wife left?
I mean, she had left many times before that. When she would leave and go, I never knew that was the last time I was going to see her. If I did, I would have, you know, freaking kept her.
Well, after that, like a month or two, you could think that was.
You know, after a while, I was thinking that she had split and moved on. I mean, there was, you know, she was maybe seeing the guy and everything that was up there, or I know that she was living with in Buford, or no, I can't remember the last one was Buford or Peachtree Corners.
Was she seeing somebody?
I don't know if she was seeing somebody, but there was this dude, and I want to say his girlfriend, that sometimes that she would stay with him in like an economy lodge out that way.
And how
And
does she know this?
she worked with him.
For the girl or the guy?
I want to say the guy and the girl both worked there, but I could be wrong. I know the guy worked there, but I know that it was a couple, you know, because then there was this one time that they had called me and it said that they were moving and she had to go do something, and she had to do something else.
And this was before the last time you saw her, right?
Well, that's
That's what I'm saying. I'm just wondering.
all that was.
I'm not misunderstanding you.
Right.
I'm not trying to trick you or confuse you.
No,
I just want to see you remember.
I'm trying to figure it out.
If you were there, I was, so that's why when I said about it, I try to remember it. I just want you to be accurate. All right, so year goes by, you still don't tell anybody that she's gone.
I mean, I'm figuring that she's already done. I mean, we were always talking about changing her name and doing all, and she had the stuff there.
Right.
You know, and she got to the point where she was unhappy with me. I'm not trying to push myself in anybody's life that doesn't want me there. I mean, look at my daughter and everything that's going on there. I tried to push. And, you know, maybe looking back at everything now, I was wrong. All the way around with both of them. Maybe I should try to push forward and try to do it. But
You said you lost your job back then. What your job was last time? Why did you lose your job?
man, this guy, now, there's a lot of things going on right there with that. But, and I do now the same thing pretty much I did then. I mean, I work on Volkswagen and things on the side. And there was a guy that, I don't know who stole the thing, but there was a saw that was missing. And I can tell you the exact guy that I borrowed this tool from and everything to, I didn't steal their saw, period.
Why did they buy it?
Because he said I stole a saw, because the saw was missing, and I lived around the corner, and he drove past my house, and he seen the back of the Volkswagen right there, the top was cut off.
So he thought you got something off the car.
You know, and I flat out said, look, I don't know anything about it. You know, and then there was that, and then there was something where I drove through the toll plaza thing on 400. You know, there was just a bunch of little things, and that was just the last straw.
How did you go to the toll plaza?
You know, there used to be a thing where you can go through it.
Right.
You know, and I was under the understanding, yeah.
Okay. You were-
I was under the understanding that, you know, there's a thing with painful, or there's just a bunch of little things. And that was just the last straw. There was no big deal, there was no,
They just let you go.
right.
They didn't file and so.
Yeah. Well, we had to do it, and, you know, if I told them everywhere, I borrowed stuff, I tried to tell them whatever, but I just said the last straw, yeah.
Did you ever go up to the Waffle House and get an altercation in the mail?
I don't remember, I saw that on the internet, I don't remember that.
Guys said you came up there and he beat you up.
And it seems like I would remember that, but I don't, you know,
You drive a yellow Volkswagen.
I never had yellow, no,
Photos of Volkswagen.
right?
Wow. You never yelled in.
Never, you know, I've never had yellow, I had a thing against yellow cars.
Okay. What do you think happened to him?
Man, every which way I think about it, it has to go back. If her parents didn't do it directly, it had to be something indirectly around them. I beat my brain.
So when you found out that a body was found just around the corner from where you were, and that the body has been dismembered with a saw,
I didn't know that the body was dismembered with salt at all.
you know the body was dismembered?
I heard that. Nobody ever said a saw. I didn't hear about that.
Autopsy report.
Nobody ever gave me an autopsy. Nobody said that to me. I didn't know that it was on the internet. Honest to God, man.
So what motive would her family have to do it?
I mean, to me it sounds strange that they got away with this stuff for all these years, and then all of a sudden, right, as we stood up and doing this right there, then all of a sudden he ended up guilty. I don't know if she came to them needing money, or,
Do you think it's likely that her own family murdered her up and cut her up?
man, her own family killed her family and friends.
Yeah, I know he committed murder, but that.
So his family and friends.
Well, why would he kill her? What would be the motive for
Hey,
that?
man, that's a big
He's involved in, your family's involved in criminality, and you're trying to protect yourself from going to jail. That's a motive to kill someone. She was, well, the motive would he have to kill her?
Well, we knew what he did. Her dad was like
So you weren't worried about him coming after you? I mean, if he's going to cut up his own daughter and cut you up?
how would he come after me? I didn't do anything. I didn't come in, here's what I'm saying, okay? I don't know if she needed money, or it may have come to him and threatened him in some way, and, you know, and they did it, maybe they were drunk, and one thing that I don't know, but anything I say at this point is speculation, because I don't know. But I feel like that hell, if there's serial killers that have killed their family and friends, and something happens to their family, okay, first of all,
Serial killers operate as kind of. Okay.
let's say what this, okay?
Well, I'm not here to talk about, I'll deal with their family and
Right.
speculation.
Well, let's look at the facts. Facts, you said that she was put in bags, right? Well, that's what it says on the internet, that she was in a lot.
I didn't say that.
So was she put in bags?
Well, as I said.
So, look, we're being straight up with you. I'm trying to help you out. I'm trying to
From what I
figure this out.
understand, from what I understand, the body parts had washed out of an area onto the street. Now, there were bags recovered there, so could you make the assumption that they may have been in bags? Yes. But I don't,
Okay.
I wasn't there to see, so I can't.
Nobody has been straight up with me on this, okay? And everything that I'm learning is basically through the internet. And we all know how the internet lies, and it's a whole
I
thing.
agree 100%.
Everything that the internet says about me, whether they're a different name, trying to hide their part, they don't even lie.
And that's why I'm asking you about that, because I'm not going to go off on speculation from the internet.
Well, he acknowledged the internet.
Throughout the trial, you heard from the testimony of Dr. Rosa James. She was a domestic violence expert. She had hundreds of experiences with persons that have been victims and perpetrators of domestic violence. She was able to tell you about some of the cycles of abuse, talking about the tension building. The beginning of 1998, we talked about the incident, the different phases where there's an incident, then there's a reconciliation, and then there's calm. And so ultimately, what we have from the beginning of 1998, when Melissa starts working with her sister, we have a representation of what that expert was talking about. We have the tensions, we have the incident, we have the reconciliation, I'll call that July 29th, and then we have the subsequent calm until we have the disappearance of Melissa. And I would submit to you that testimony of the expert, of Dr. James, is relevant testimony. It's testimony you can and should consider. And
Not as the tape is. Can we get to 350 likes before he finishes?
I would ask you to put the appropriate weight on her testimony and use that in your determination. Dr. Mark Gilbo is an anthropologist with a specialization in skeletal remains,
Yes.
analysis of skeletal remains.
Tell us about Gilbo, who said you should have done DNA testing.
He observed saw marks on the remains of Melissa Wolfenbarger, and as far as the exhibits that he was able to go over, Exhibit 34, which you'll have, you see the example here where he's talking about the part of the bone that had been shaved down, and you have the next exhibit, the autopsy of the remains of Melissa Wolfenbarger. You see where the saw marks are that were indicated by Dr. Gilbo, what he observed. And then you have the ridges here where it also appears that there's some type of mechanical saw or device that is being used to dismember the remains of Melissa Wolfenbarger. I'll submit to you, those are facts and evidence along with the fact that this defendant was in possession of the saw, the fact that this defendant borrowed the saw from his job, the fact that this job never got the saw back. Those are all factors you can consider. Those are all logical, common sense deductions that you can draw. And then the testimony of Dr. Cherry. You heard about the analysis and testing, in particular, the swabbing of Norma's mouth, the analysis of the dental records, and that ties directly into the additional analysis and tests that Detective Stein did when he got connected to Detective Shepard. And we have that additional testing where, even though it didn't result in anything useful, Detective Stein was able to retrieve the bags and submit them for additional testing. And I submit to you that those bags were outside for who knows how long. I submit to you that there was evidence that the head had been moved. I submit to you that George McEachran encountered that bag along with his daughter. I submit to you that Tina Miller, Wolfenbarger County Medical Examiner's Office, responded to that location along with Detective Kelly and the Atlanta Police Department. And even though that did not result in useful information, the process is important because it's important to cross every T and dot every I. And in this investigation, that's a part of the process, and that's what we'll do. And at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to sit down. The defense will have the opportunity to.
You're gonna sit down. They've elevated the volume. I'm gonna sit down.
This case is not about the family of Melissa Wolfenbarger. This case is about the tumultuous relationship between this defendant and our victim, Melissa. He wasn't able to control her, and when he lost control, he murdered her. That's what the evidence has shown, and at the conclusion of the case, after the judge charges you on the law, when I ask you to vote the truth, and that's guilty on that count of murder, and this is that.
Thank you. Mr. McDermott,
Thank
does the
you.
defense wish to make a closing statement?
Yes,
Closing
Your Honor.
argument? Thank you.